project to work on. The two lead partners on this were the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds and the Global Health Institute, and they both do fantastic work, and we're so happy to be here to work with them on this project. So let's give them a big round of applause. I have the oh-so-exciting job of taking care of business before we get going. So just a couple of quick points before we get started. The first of which is there's no photography, audio recording, or video recording of any kind during the broadcast. And we actually ask that everybody turn off any electronic devices so that you're here and truly present for this presentation. So we'll take a moment for everyone to do that. I see lots of people moving around, which is fantastic. Good job. If at any point during the program you need to leave for an emergency purpose, you should seek out an overture usher and they will let you out of the room. If you do leave the theater, you will not be allowed back in due to security measures. So think wisely before you make that decision. Other than that, we're going to get started in just a few minutes, so please sit back and thank you again for being here. We hope that you enjoy the program. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Ward, Interim Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I want to welcome you to Change Your Mind, Change the World, co-hosted by the Global Health Institute and the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds, both of them belonging and very much part of UW-Madison. There is likely no other single topic that has greater impact on the world than that of sustainable well-being. And it's one that UW-Madison is taking a lead role in at the global level. Today's dialogue that you're about to be part of is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You're among an invited audience that will have an opportunity to share in the wisdom from the world's most highly regarded spiritual leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who will be joined by his good friend and colleague, Matthieu Ricard. This dialogue will be moderated by the celebrated author and columnist Arianna Huffington. In addition, you'll hear from Davidson, Director of the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds, and Jonathan Patz, Director of the Global Health Institute. These two scholars represent the best of what the University of Wisconsin-Madison is all about. I've had the pleasure of knowing both of them, and I am among their greatest fans. In my role, I've had the honor of supporting them as they have gained international reputations within influential circles and enriched the lives of thousands of students here on campus. It is true that great people attract other great people, and it is because of Jonathan and Richie and His Holiness, Matthieu and Arianna are here. I want to thank you for being part of this, and we hope that you will take away from this afternoon a truly enriching experience. Thank you.
This afternoon, many of you are here who are not here in the morning, and I'd like to just set the stage. Yesterday, the speakers convened with a small group of people to begin to consider the topics that we will explore in more detail this afternoon. One of the things that we had the speakers do, an exercise that we did with the speakers and with our gathered guests of about 200, is to ask each of them to envision what a world would be like if it were different from the world we have today. Imagine what a world would be like if our children were nurtured with kindness and compassion and mindfulness starting in the very early years. Imagine what a world would be like if we paid more attention to our interactions with the environment and took conservation seriously. We all consider those topics, and we're all asked to deeply reflect on how it would feel to us to live in such a world. And each of us was encouraged to write down a few words, a few phrases about what that different, transformed world might look like. And we're really honored today to have a group of people from the Academy for the Love of Learning in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is an institute that is founded and directed by a dear friend of ours, Aaron Stern, and his colleagues, Molly Sturgis and Logan Phillips, are going to take the words and the feelings that we conveyed together yesterday and turn them into a little piece of performance to begin our afternoon today. So Molly and Logan.
We, more than a collection of eyes, we, this collection of hearts gathered, we, dreaming the world that we want to be, we, people coming together as equals, without hierarchy to our joys and sorrows, but instead seeing this happiness together. People who have so much compassion for all living things in our fragile earth, we would never willingly destroy one another. Well-being is not a privilege. Education and onward, we are warm, we are exciting, loving, and open. We are eyes meeting eyes and hearts meeting hearts. We are warm, connected, and joyous. We are compassionate, joyful. We are fun. We are funny. We are busy across generations. This work is going to take a while. We are clear interconnection, compassion and care for ourselves, each other, and this entire world. We are peaceful, free, euphoric, liberated. We are quieter than the society that we live in today. We are hopefully colorful, diverse, dynamic, warm, and good. In the world we are building, people are not alone at birth. People are not alone at death. People are not alone in their illness. Health is more than a sum of its parts, and we are more than a sum. We are more than zero. Love prevails with wisdom, connection, and balance. We are huge circles of people gathered. We are open and joyous. Our concern trumps pity. Our self-sacrifice is viewed as self-fulfillment. Borders that resist communication melt away. We respect tradition, and fear of each other is slowly disappearing because suddenly, I'm less afraid to look you in the eye, and suddenly, if you're less afraid to look me in the eye, then maybe we see each other, eyes seeing eyes and hearts seeing hearts. Borders that resist education are melting. An elder elephant commuting with a blue whale, respecting and retreating, moved to work for creation, for protection. I do this more for you than I do for myself. Always being in love, it's the feeling of luminousness and joyousness. It's this wordlessness of seeing what is dancing in your eyes. And maybe the world we are building will feel just a little bit different than today. A little bit more healthy than today. Just a little bit more connected. The world where the feminine is respected, honored, equally valued, shared power and balance with the masculine. A world in which we will not need jails. As our wounded hearts become tender hearts, as our tears of pain become moisture for fields of flowers blooming in outrageous color. It feels so good to be human, so great to be alive, vibrant, alive, and generous, beauty, surrounded by vibrant systems that are alive with a green humming, a buzzing, a singing, a laughing, and yes, a wiggling. We are replete with love, tenderness, safety, and our enthusiasm is passionate. We are peaceful and interconnected, soft and strong, my hand in your hand, honest, happy, bright eyes, full stomachs. Hope cannot be seen, but we are a beautifully sung song. Our minds have become settled like a snow globe that's been sitting just the right amount of time. We are soaring.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce someone who has been so passionate and so influential about the topics that we're considering today, and who's really been an agent of transformation on this planet in so many countless ways, Arianna Huffington.
Thank you, Ricard. Thank you so much, Richie. I'm really honored and humbled to be your moderator for this session. And I see my role very simply as making sure you hear as much as possible from His Holiness. I'm sure that's all you want. And my panelists completely agree. So I just want to quickly set the stage. I take part in many conversations about politics, about media, about business, and I can say unequivocally that there is no more important conversation going on the planet than the conversation that has been going on at this conference. So I feel, in fact, that the timing for this conference could not have been more significant, because there is a kind of perfect storm happening right now where three very different trends are converging. The first one is the growing recognition that, to use a term from Alcoholics Anonymous, our world has become unmanageable. that we have leaders in business, in media, in politics, smart people making terrible decisions, not because they're not smart, but because they're not wise. So we clearly need to tap into our own wisdom. Our leaders need to tap into their own wisdom. And that's the work that Richie Davidson and all the people that you are working with, Richie, are focusing on, the work that Matthieu is doing, the work that Jonathan is doing, the work that Dan Coleman, whom you heard from earlier, is doing. The second trend is very optimistic. It's the fact that all this work that used to be marginal has now become increasingly mainstream. About 25% of corporate America now offers some form of mindfulness training, some form of de-stressing, something to their employees, recognizing that American business is losing $300 billion a year because of stress. So if nothing else, the bottom line is talking to them. And so suddenly seeing that work coming to the center of our lives and even of corporate America is incredibly significant. The third point is that paradoxically, technology, which has made us more disconnected from ourselves by making us hyper-connected to our devices, is also becoming a source for disconnecting. The work you're doing in that field is incredibly important. At the Huffington Post, we have launched an app that we are calling GPS for the Soul. It's free. You tap the camera sensor on your iPhone, and it gives you a proxy for stress, your heart rate variability. And then you create a personalized guide with all the things that help you get back to that centered place. You know, pictures of your loved ones, music, poetry, breathing exercises. And this is based on two truths that are really part of what we're going to be talking about here. The first truth is that we all have that place in us, that place of strength, serenity, wisdom. And the second truth is that most of the time we are not there. So really, part of our work is how can we get there more often? If we're off course so much, how can we learn to have an impeccable course-correcting mechanism? So that is really the exciting adventure we are on. And I want to throw it now to Richie. And Dan Coleman was telling me at lunch that when Dan and Richie were at Harvard together in the 70s. Don't you wish you were a fly on the wall during these conversations? A faculty member told them both that the work they are doing on the mind, on meditation, on all these things was career-ending. Well, we are very glad that they didn't listen. And here is Richie now, at the top of an incredible career, among other things, leading the way in the mind-body medicine connections. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you, Arianna. Thank you, Arianna. And I should just tell you that I have GPS for the soul on my iPhone, and I get wonderful reminders throughout the day. So I would highly recommend it. Your Holiness, this afternoon, I'm going to be very brief, and I'd like to review 5 facts that science has taught us about well-being. The first fact is that well-being is a skill. And this is a fact that we glean from our understanding of neuroplasticity, the idea that the brain can change in response to experience and in response to training. And that fact teaches us that the emotional circuits in the brain especially are very amenable to change through training and through experience. And we can harness that by techniques that can be taught in the ways that you have been advocating in a very secular, natural way. We have a study that's about to come out in the next couple of weeks that was done by a very talented graduate student of mine who you've met, Your Holiness. Her name is Helen Wing, and she did a study looking at the effects of very short-term training in compassion, 30 minutes a day for just 2 weeks. And we measured the brain before and after the training. And we had a comparison group that got a different kind of training. And it turns out that people became more cooperative, they became more altruistic, and their brains actually changed functionally after just 2 weeks of training. And so this is one of many indicators that we can think of as that these are skills which can be enhanced through training. The second fact is that well-being seems to be inversely related to mind wandering. So the more you mind wander, the less So there was a study done a couple of years ago that was published in a very major journal. And this was a study where people were sampled in the real world using iPhones and other kinds of smartphones, and they were beeped during the day, and they were asked 3 questions. One question is, what are you doing right now? The second question is your mind actually focused on what you're doing? And the third question is, how happy or unhappy are you? And the findings were actually quite striking. The findings indicate that 47% of the time, the average American is not actually paying attention to what she or he is doing. 47% of the time. And during these periods, people report that they're mostly unhappy. And when they become focused on what they're doing, they report that they actually feel better, their well-being is higher.
So, can you explain what one mind wandering is?
Sure. So mind wandering would be, for example, how many... Your Holiness, everyone, I think, is laughing because the concept for you, I think, is foreign because your mind is so steady. But
No. I mean, you see, even if you want to open this, unless your mind is focusing there, you see, look there and do that, you cannot accomplish.
So whatever we do, our mind is on that thing. So His Holiness is wondering whether, what is the relationship between distraction in general? I mean, do you mean just distracted mind or?
So a good example, which I think the audience will resonate with, is how many people in the audience have had the experience of reading a book, turning a page, and at the end of the page, not having any idea what they actually read. And their mind was somewhere else.
That is something different. You see, your eye consciousness simply is the reading, because of the reading, but your mental consciousness goes somewhere else.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Oh. But then physical level,
but many of the physical activities, unless you pay attention to what you're doing, you won't be able to perform that task.
Music, hearing, but your mind can go some different things.
Somewhere else.
I think even sort of eating, tasting, this is a mouth for movement, but your mind can go other. But then some physical actual action, unless you pay.
Attention.
Otherwise,
Well, I think that that's one of the important points about this kind of research is that it's showing that when our mind wanders in the ways that I'm describing, our performance on the tasks that we're engaged in suffers. We cannot perform them as efficiently. And it also is a source of suffering. People report not being happy when they're distracted in this way.
보드기 가장 아주 지금 로컴들 관아서디 안데 그래서 섬주디 그 싸울 찾아왔어.
말에 더 군중국에 있고 더 군중국에 가지네. 전부 미국 대투고 봐. 미국만 망보진.
No. I myself also not like that. This is some chanting, some recitation. They recite, since it's memorize, right? Memorize. So the word go automatically, but mind can go here and there. Any samdangwa zudi, ma de ba gurus ba tön sa she, ya sim ya de shin zhi na shin de tön jo ya shin de tön jo shi bu.
So it's only saying that actually, kind of mind wandering that you're talking about is familiar to him too. When he does his, practices, some of them involve chanting, and sometimes when chanting, your mind wanders, and then the actual visualization has to be done, but you have already skipped that section, and he has to go back and do it properly to be able to do the visualization.
Sometimes 2 times, or even 3rd time. That's you. Hey, same experience. So that's why you see, it is very, very important to practice, to cultivate single-pointed mind.
Yes. Yeah. So very briefly, the other points about science and well-being are these. The third point is that well-being is associated with specific patterns of brain activity and patterns of activity in our body, and they're connected, so that when our minds are at ease, our bodies, to some extent, are at ease, and this explains why emotions are actually important for our physical health in addition to our mental health. The fourth point is that the scientific research today indicates that there are 3 important components of well-being. One is equanimity or emotional balance. One indicator of that is a person's capacity to return back to baseline, return back to being calm after a stressful event might occur. So they may react, but they are able to come back down quickly. A second component is mindfulness and attentiveness of the sort that we've been talking about. And a third component is something Your Holiness talks a lot about, and that is generosity. Generosity seems experimentally, in experimental research, to promote well-being. And there's a very important study that was done a few years ago, published again in a very major journal, where they gave people a large sum of money in the beginning of the day. They randomly assigned people. They gave them $100 at the beginning of the day, and they said, please go, and most people have things that they've wanted to buy for themselves, but they've never had an opportunity. Please use this money and go buy whatever you'd like for yourself. And they came back at the end of the day to the laboratory. A second group was assigned to another condition where they were given $100 and said, please go buy things for other people. You can use the money in any way you want to spend it on others, but you cannot use any of it for yourself. And guess which group, at the end of the day, reports much higher levels of happiness and well-being? The group that spent money on others. So there's actually good experimental research. The last point is maybe the most important, and that is that there is an innate disposition toward well-being and generosity. And scientific research in young babies, infants 6 months of age, shows that there is a preference that infants show for cooperative, altruistic behavior compared to antagonistic and aggressive behavior.
그때 진보스 그래.
No, 근데 더 chen 더 직접 셈게 또 보고 쳐야 돼.
So these are 5, I think, important facts that science is now teaching us about well-being. So thank you.
Thank you, Richie. So, Your Holiness, given what Richie has said, that science shows, what is it that we can do that we are not doing to help these tools that you know that you've been teaching about become more widespread?
다는 제리 다는 쉬고 되게 실시하게 돈에서 또 요구 돈에 또 양내한테 되게 배야 또 끝난 거로 봤어. 근데 뭐 캡처해서 일이야. 세세제가 답시로 가려놨어. 제리 되게 배주진. 제리가 또 되게 배주진.
Again, this morning I mentioned, I think again here, education, through education. And also the media people, inform public, you see these sort of the findings. That's the only way. That's the way. Question? I always is telling, when I met media people, firstly I mentioned my own commitment promoting the ethics, secular ethics. Then secondly, promoting religious harmony. And then I told the media people also have important role regarding promotion of these values. It is very, very important. The media people usually you see the negative things. Of course, negative things become news. These positive things will not be a news. So, as a sort of a news reporter, you see, they usually focusing on those negative things. Then the people in the past, many occasions, many questioners asked me, "Oh, basic human nature is some negative, aggressive, negative thing." So, future of humanity is doom. Because of, you see, they got that kind of information every day, some negative things. So basically, I believe, and also telling people, as you see, you find basic human nature is more gentleness. I think 2 factors: the way we're born from our mother. So naturally, biologically, you see, the mother have tremendous sort of affection. Without that, children cannot survive. So this is a question of survival. Secondly, we are social animal. So social animal means individual's future, individual's life, entirely depend on the rest of the community. So even animal, no religion, no constitution, no police force, no government, but because of their biological nature, social animal. So they work together. So caring each other like that. So we are social animal. So basically, we already sort of have this potential, this seed there. And then logically, those people who received affection from other, those people who very much appreciate the mother's affection, then they also have this sort of seed of showing affection to other. So that's human nature. So basic human nature, I think we can say gentleness, more positive. Then grown up, and also the social environment, the society where is not talking about these values, only money. And then, in order to make money, too much competition. So that sort of the environment, then you see the sort of effect or basic sort of positive nature, then sort of dormant.
Become more dormant.
Dormant. And aggressive part, and then become active. So therefore, on the sort of basic, I think, also the good nature, at the young age, still very fresh. Now, while grown up, usually you see these things becoming more dormant. At that time, we must educate through education. These values are extremely important whole rest of life. Then is that basic sort of good nature. Then, because of through nurturing. I think at the initial level, biological factor, then use human intelligence, reasoning, educate. These are very important for happy well-being, well-being oneself and well-being of the family, the society. So use intelligence. Then it's strengthening of these some kind of sort of emotion based on biological factor. Now combined with reason, combined with human intelligence, then it will become very firm. So this is very possible. That's why you see, I always stress the importance of education, not faith. Education is extremely important. So the material, the scientists, your research, really providing good material to educate people, to bring conviction about these values. Like we, something different dress, and then when we say something compassion, these things, then some people feel, oh, that's their own world, their own way of sort of life. So I think, I think okay, Tibetan, the Buddhist society, now Matthieu from France. So maybe his French friend may feel, or he has something wrong.
Matthieu, would you like to respond to this?
I'm working hard on making it straight.
So it would be great to transcribe what His Holiness said so that we can all have it every day and look at it, because my mind didn't wander, but nevertheless, I'd like to see it every day. Did your mind wander a little bit? No. You see, our mind kept steady while you were talking.
That also is depend the subject.
Yes.
Subject something you really interest, then your mind go there.
Yeah.
But some kind of my own case. When I was young, a compulsory study, but I have no interest. So often memorizing and looking there, but my mind goes somewhere else.
Well, now they call it attention deficit disorder.
And
they put children on Ritalin. I know everybody wants to keep hearing you talk, but let's go to Jonathan, because Jonathan is doing amazing work here at the university on the environment. Of course, he shared a Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore in 2007 as the lead author of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and has been doing great work ever since. And so Jonathan is going to talk a little bit about the interconnectedness between what's happening in our lives and what's happening to our environment.
Great. Arianna, thank you so much, and thank you for plugging the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I was one of the lead authors, so not the. But Your Holiness, this morning I spoke with you about last week's news about, for the first time in human existence, that we've exceeded 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we talked about. That comes from burning fossil fuels, that 50 years ago we were at a level of 320, and we're concerned if we get above 450, that's a dangerous level of the Earth's heating. So we talked about that already. And I also spoke not only how I'm very concerned about the climate change problem, but that I see that grappling with climate change and reducing our consumption of energy, especially from fossil fuels, is a golden opportunity for human health and well-being because of the pollution issue and healthy cities. I also spoke about my work with the endangered species, the peregrine falcon, and that many endangered species were in trouble when we kept focusing on the individual animal or plant, and it was only when we had the insight to look beyond the individual and look at the habitat, the surroundings around that endangered species, did we really have success. So this afternoon, I want to continue this theme of the interdependence of our species' survival with our natural environment, which is being threatened by overconsumption of natural resources and many other issues. And I'd like to share with you a story of a well-intended project from the World Health Organization in the 1950s. They went into Borneo, where there was lots of malaria, and they sprayed a pesticide called dieldrin. That was this toxic pesticide to get rid of malaria. Now, initially, there was great success, and malaria went down. People were happy, but it was a short time thereafter that something happened. There was a brand new major epidemic of a different disease called typhus. And not only was there a new epidemic, the village huts, which have thatched roofs, the straw roofs, thatched huts, most of the roofs fell down, collapsed. And you might ask the question, why? Well, you, of all people, knowing the interdependence of life, could probably figure out the answer. What happened when they sprayed the pesticide, it killed all the mosquitoes that carry malaria, but it killed lots of other insects and things that eat insects like gecko, lizards, and other little animals. The toxin goes up the food chain. And in the village, there are lots of cats that eat lizards and geckos. And of course, as a top predator, the pesticide accumulates the most in the cats. So all of the cats in the village died. Well, then, with the cats gone, the rodent population exploded. There was an explosion of rats. With the cats gone, the rat population exploded, and rats often carry fleas, blood-sucking fleas, which carry the typhus disease. So the intention of reducing malaria was good, but without understanding the interdependencies and knowing about the ecology of this whole system, that one problem created another problem. And you might ask about the thatched roofs caving down. Well, when the insects died, one of the insects was this particular parasitic wasp. And she lays her eggs in caterpillars that live in the thatch straw. And when the WHO sprayed the pesticide, all the wasps died, but the caterpillars were protected. They were in the thatch roofs. So they weren't exposed to the pesticide. So when the wasp died, the caterpillar population took off, and they ate all the thatched roofs. So I give you this story because of the interdependence of all life. And a famous Wisconsin naturalist named John Muir once said, whenever we tug on any one thing, we find it hitched to everything in the universe. So that was a Wisconsin naturalist. I want you to remember that. So the lesson here is that it's the importance of being mindful of the interdependence of life, the awareness of knowing these linkages, because without this awareness, unintended consequences, more often than not, outnumber our good intentions. If we now are in a globalized world, we need to recognize that the actions that we do independently, or for ourselves or for our community, can actually impact others. And I talked about how our energy consumption is affecting the entire Earth's climate. We're disrupting the Earth's climate. So we need to be mindful of that connection. We need to also be mindful of the implications of our consumerism. For example, more headlines. It's possible that the Western demand for cheap clothing maybe has something to do with the establishment of under-regulated factories, textile factories in Bangladesh, that because everyone's trying to save money to develop and compete in a global market, that rules are skipped and dangers are traded off for money. And hundreds of people, hundreds of workers died just last month in a textile factory in Bangladesh. If we as consumers in a global world understand the full cost accounting, in fact, Dan Goldman has written a book on this called Ecological Intelligence, Understanding from Cradle to Cradle. If we know the impact of our consumerism and we only demand green products or products made with ethics and equity and without social disadvantage, I think we could have a positive force. So I'd like to finally mention some good news that you also know about. Lord Richard Laird, who mentioned this and in fact has been a leader on beyond GDP, beyond the gross domestic product at the United Nations. There's been involvement towards pushing towards a global index of development that's not just about economic capital. And this key index now is an effort to bring in social and political capital, which means education, freedom, equality, culture, etc. And also environmental capital, which is also called natural capital. That these three are highly interdependent, so there's not one that's greater than the other. And I think it's a real important issue to move forward, to get to really integrate and value all three: economic, social, political, and environmental capital. So I'll just end by saying that our institution, our Global Health Institute at the University of Wisconsin, is trying to mirror these efforts in our own mission, because we address at the same time the human condition, environmental conditions, and ethics and values in every single project that we pursue. So I have a question for you. Unless Arianna has...
No, go ahead.
Okay. Outside of Buddhism, do you know of cases where people or communities have changed from valuing economic capital to more valuing social capital?
I think the same human being. Also, they depend on the, I think, education or cultural heritage. So up to now, those materially affluent societies, the whole, as I mentioned, I think lunchtime, the existing education is very much oriented about material value. I think that's understandable. When I think separate education institutions started in Europe, I remember one time in Italy, the Bologna University, a few years ago, you see, I attended their 1000th anniversary. So separate education institutions started, then moral ethics taken care by church, quite well balanced. Now the effect of the church sometimes influence of church sometimes really reduce. Of course, the non-believer also now, I think number of non-believer also increasing. So then education institution 1000 years ago only take care about brain, intelligent development. Now today, the existing education institution originally only care about knowledge. Now that institution also should take care about moral ethics. Now if moral ethics based on religious faith, then multi-religious community, including non-believers there, then some complication there. So we have to find, educate about moral ethics without relying on religious faith. So only that, only I think they kasota kumshik kiwamada
So it's really more of a cultural and historical kind of, habit of the societies. Otherwise, at the fundamental level, human beings are the same.
I want to make one point. Many years ago, I think perhaps late 70s or 80s, one time in Oxford, in England, this is some discussions. Then one, I think two professors, quite old, and one old Englishman.
Dignified.
Dignified, yes, dignified. And then he mentioned at that time, the population, world population, 6 billion. We discuss about gap, rich and poor, global level, mainly global level. So this is a gap. We have to reduce this gap. That, very true, this is a gap, not only morally wrong, but practically also source of problem. Even within the country like America, the number of billionaires increasing, but a lot of poor people still remain poor. And sometimes poor people, the number increasing, more difficult. So this we must tackle, we must address effectively. So then these professors, two professors told me the Southerners' living standard raise up to living standard which Northern world already is enjoying. Then nature resources, whether sufficient or not, already questionable. So now today, 7 billion. I think one time I heard BBC mentioned end of this century, human population will reach 10 billions. So now that's a really serious matter. If you see the 7 billion number remain, then we can discuss to see how to sort of address these things. But this population increase. In the meantime, you see, we have to deal with the reduced gap, rich and poor. Then, what do you say?
Well, let me just make one comment about population growth, which, when I think about the root drivers of almost everything, it's either population on the planet or per person consumption of resources. And I think that with many international efforts that have been very successful in education and allowing women's education especially, and having equal rights for women, around the world, I think we're actually having more success in curbing our population growth, even though it is growing and it will become more and more of a problem. I think we are dealing with that problem better than we are in per person consumption of natural resources. And that's why I think that for me, it's a higher priority to get individuals to reduce their ecological footprint, or how much they're using up as far as resources on the planet.
그런 사람들은 보고见过些在多了呀，修家边上这个袋子的等，那全过了，所以呢，他开起来没给他们说是不就些的了。
I think you very rightly mentioned we must think, or we must treat this problem as a sort of one community. 7 billion being actually one human community. Geographically, it's divided, but actually now also ecology, global warming, and also the global economy. So now no longer is it say, my nation, my continent, but we must look entire world as a whole. So more holistic, as you mentioned, more holistic. But then, I don't know. I think when we're focusing on one particular problem, the side effect, the method to solve that problem, side effect, as you mentioned, always there. Then I think global level, holistic 차단제 형태가 가오르다.
So then, which suggests that you need to have a much more comprehensive approach and perspective. But then when you bring it up to the global level, that of course raises huge challenges.
The consumerism, 7 billion human beings, through education, lead their lifestyle like hermit.
Simple.
Hermitage, hermitage, that's I think impossible. And that also is a question, whether good or not, bad, I don't know. Difficult to say, isn't it? Remain hermit, but economically, some effect, but very unhappy hermit. And hermit themselves fighting, not much sort of interest, not much good. So these are really very difficult when you use the 직시에 이르잖아요. 다 가르쳐버려 사실보다 시시하게 하시면
So he's also saying that when you listen to presentations such as yours, which really points out the enormity of the challenge, which needs a kind of a united effort from everybody, then it really makes you feel, can we really do this?
Well, Albert Einstein said that, we had this frame of thinking that created the problem, so we need a new frame of thinking. And in the speaker that Professor Ilona Kickbush this morning was talking about a new way of governance, that, we need to think about our global commons. The climate is a global common, valued by everyone, and we all depend on it. And many of our natural resources are now global commons that if countries act as individuals with sovereign rights and become, just look after themselves and don't have compassion for the other humans of the world, it's not going to be fixed. And we have to get beyond our current sovereign type of governance and have a global governance toward these problems.
So that's I think, the spirit of European Union. I really admire. It's thinking more concerned about common interest. So sooner or later, you see, the world have to follow that kind of principle. Then at least, you see, there's some benefit, but still solving all our problems. I don't think. Still problem. So now I think from the selfish viewpoint, now I have no worry. Now already 78. So another 10, 20 years, and then finish. So the younger generation have to face these problems.
But Your Holiness, going back to Richard's work and Matthieu's work, can we have a global governance that will really achieve what we want if we don't change the way human beings think and act? There's an expression here that people are burnt out. People are working hard, they're stressed out, they're sleep deprived, they're exhausted. Is there a connection between burned out human beings and burning up the planet?
True. That's true. I think the present existing, the governance survey, the system, I think this is old-fashioned. In the past, small population, the economy also limited. So I think the concept, and then more or less sort of each country or even each sort of community self-sufficient. So the question of independence is something very, very important. Now today's reality, everything interdependent. So the system which developed on the basis of reality, each community, each nation self-sufficient. Some kind of importance of sovereignty, right? Sovereignty. Now look, European Union. Now, you see, they realize after Second World War, I think the De Gaulle and Adenauer, I think they really, because of the long-term sort of visions. So they set up this European Union. So eventually, I think on the regional basis, North America, South America, whole Europe, whole Africa, whole Asia, whole Europe, I think sooner or later we have to sort of create that kind of a union. Then eventually, one union, whole world, one union. then I think danger of threat on the name of sovereign sort of right. I think no longer much sort of danger. Then we can reduce expenditure of military forces. Eventually, the world should be free because of the disarmament. That's possible. So that, I think, within this century, end of this century, I think very possible. So we have to think. And then I think a lot of money, I think, will save. I think a budget for defense, for military purpose, that will high, sort of very expensive. And then I think like you, those scientists, they are sort of marvelous brain used for destructive. Sad. Such a wonderful brain used for how to kill, how to number of people kill simultaneously. Sad. And then meantime spent billions of dollars for building. I often see expressing they like nuclear weapon. You spend a lot of money, and even you see to keep these weapons also is quite expensive. But at the same time, no one dare use these weapons. So waste of money. If you really cherishing these weapons, then must use. That also unthinkable. So then, nobody can dare use this, but at the same time, the circumstances is such you have to keep these things. So this we should not just take for granted way. Now we must find ways and means, you see, how to deal with these problems, how to change. I don't know. Think these problems more confused here. So then better relax.
That's a perfect segue to Matthieu Ricard, who for 40 years now has been studying in the Himalayan regions, a Buddhist monk, a photographer, but also a scientist who got his PhD at the Pasteur Institute, and a man who is equally at home in the mountains of the Himalayan regions as he is where I last saw him at the World Economic Forum in Davos. So, Matthieu.
Yes. So I think many years he really spent for the serious practice. I think experience, out of practice is concerned, I think he more experienced than me. I think really very good monk. Very good monk.
So, yes, you mentioned about being French. I think this is an incurable disease. So, this morning, Your Holiness, our friend Lord Layard mentioned that the underestimated importance of mental illness. He mentioned the number 40% of incapacitations. That means the number of days and months and years that you cannot work, that you cannot function in life. Not the number of death, but how many you're just unable to function. And 40% of all days of life that we are not able to function is related to mental illness. By mental illness, it means things like depression, about 8%. Then there's other mental disorders, like phobias, anxiety, post-traumatic disorder, and even more serious, like schizophrenia, altogether about 12%. And then there is different kinds of addiction, which also come from mental problems.
That's right.
8% of disabilitation come from alcoholism, and 2% from drug use. So now compared to that, if you look at cancer, it's only 2%. Of course, the number of deaths is much greater due to cancer than to mental disease, but either you cure or you die, but the fact that you are not incapacitated usually for many, many years. And heart disease is only also 5%. So that means that a great part of what the negative influence on the quality of life is due to mental disease. So of course, some of them are due to basic defect in our brain, like Alzheimer when we get old, it's a decay of the brain, or some form of schizophrenia and so forth. But a lot has to do with the workings of mind, unhealthy minds. Like depression, of course, is a complex phenomenon, and some has to do also with the chemicals of the brain, but there's a lot has to do with the way we deal with the world. We ruminate all the time the past. We are full of hopes and expectations and fears, and we are centered on us, what's going to happen, and we lose the meaning of life. We lose the faculty to express and feel love. All those are mental problems. Craving that leads to different forms of addiction when they become more serious, it begins with the mind that has lost its balance. If we find something pleasant, and then we want it, and again, and again. And neuroscientists will tell you that you start building something in the brain that is just about wanting. It's different than what gives you pleasure. So at the end, you don't enjoy anymore, but you want it. So you are addicted. That's built up by the mind. So just as it was built by the mind, a healthy mind can also find remedy. We know that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, the mixture of Aaron Beck, whom you know, methods with meditation, is one of the most efficient ways to prevent relapse from depression, up to 30 to 40%. For people who had 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 episodes, it's as efficient as medication. So that's again working with healthy minds. But we vastly underestimate the power of transformation of the mind. This is granted, this is how I am. And we spend most of our hopes and fears about remedying the outer condition. If I had all that, I will be happy. If I don't have that, I can't be happy. So things like that. Of course, we need to improve outer conditions in this world, especially where these outer conditions are terrible, when there is no peace, when there is no food, when there is no health. But still, that doesn't mean that we should not take care of a healthy mind. That's what Richie and many others are doing. So an healthy mind is obviously a need because our mind is what we are dealing with from morning till evening. It can be our best friend, but it can be also our worst enemy, whether we like it or not. So the way our mind works is going to color all our world, the world we experience. So then there's all these approaches that has been developed in the Buddhist science, contemplative science, by many traditions, how to make a mind that is more free from the running of this destructive emotion of craving, hatred, jealousy, pride, mental confusion, and how to enhance as skills the factors that will make a healthy mind that is conducive to well-being. So loving kindness, compassion, inner freedom from those wandering thoughts, inner confidence, inner strength, and above all, altruistic love and compassion, which is known to be what gives the most fulfillment for you and also obviously for others. So then the healthy mind is also intimately linked with this kind of care, benevolence, altruism, love, compassion. Because me from morning till evening is a very miserable condition for you, and also you make the life of everyone miserable. It's a lose-lose situation. Everyone is losing. Compassion, of course, it's the most sort of fulfilling state of mind, and of course, obviously, you are making to make others happy, so it's a win-win situation. So that can be trained. Now, our collaboration has shown that, but how can we take that to a bigger level for the issue that has been on health, public health? Well, if there's healthy minds of individuals, you will get a healthy society. If everyone collaborates more than competition, if there are less consumerism and find more contentment, if they find that voluntary simplicity is not depriving yourself, it's just having a simpler and happier life. It's not depriving yourself from the good things in life, which would be stupid. It's simply not being constantly tormented by wanting more when you have one you want two, and then it's endless. So how can we bring it to a bigger issue about environment, about global governance? Well, if we see what are the main challenges that we are facing today, they're basically something to do with 3 time scale. The fast economy. Everything goes fast. The stock market goes up and down within 1 week, and nobody knows why. Some people think they know. Very fast. And then they say, oh, if the economy doesn't go well, everything else will not work. So this is reality, and we have to take care. But, of course, there is quality of life. How you feel. How you feel in your family. What is the quality in the workplace, in society. Time of a family, of a duration of a lifetime, flourishing, human flourishing, gross national happiness. I was just a few days ago with Mohammed Yunus, and he says, if we become money-making robots, is reducing the wonderful qualities of human being to this single dimension. So that's not worth living in society. And as Gandhi said also, there's always be enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed, which is limitless. So we need to take care of the second time scale dimension, which is longer, like 50 years, 100 years. And then there's a longer one, which is environment. Like now it's becoming shorter because of the urgency, but before it used to be 10,000 years, 1 million years, so longer period. So it's normal that economists cannot think in terms of 100 years, because in their accounts at the end of the year, it doesn't matter. There's a famous American comic called Groucho Marx. So I'm a Marxist, but from the Groucho branch. He said, why should I care for future generation? What did they did for me? So of course, the people who are not there cannot do anything for you. So that's what some economists are thinking. This doesn't matter for me. So that is why the only concept that can allow to span those 3 time scales, the economy now, the quality of life, happiness, and the future generation, is consideration for others, altruism. That's the only one. Because then if you have more consideration for others, you are not going to play like at the casino with the resources of other people. If you have more consideration for others, you will make sure that society is an harmonious society. And if you have more consideration for others, you will not enjoy everything knowing that you are degrading the planet. So that's no more altruism, love, care, compassion, something soft, something extra, something that you can have if everything goes well. It is at the heart of solving our problem. And this is based on interdependence and interconnection. Martin Luther King said, we all came on different boats, but now we are on the same ship. So that's obvious. So in a way, in the same way that individualism in a group, in a community, doesn't work well, in the same way, at the level of nations, if we only concentrate on the benefit of single nation, then we cannot solve those big problems. There's no way. This is beyond the scope of nations and individual interests. That's why we need for taking care of something that concerns all of us. We all breathe the same air, more or less, so if it's in danger, we should care. And that comes with generating more altruism. What is wonderful is we know it's part of human nature, and we know we can cultivate it, so we should go for it and do our very best. And I think that's the key to solving those problems cognitively and also as human beings, how we can change. We can change, we should change to a more caring society.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Matthieu. You could go on forever as far as I'm concerned. What Matthieu has also said on another occasion is that if we can reach a critical mass of people who are thinking of others, who are operating from their altruistic instincts rather than our purely selfish greed instincts, then there can be a tipping point where a lot of the things we're talking about can appear and be solvable. So Do you see any such critical mass and tipping points in the horizon?
간다 Matthieu 기단지에 고유도 요즘 뭐지리야 다가다 현존다 삼단에 미디 자자 망으로 전제 서럽지 레슨하니 지속권을 교육 대그랬으네 소도 시어스 저 군주가 seksual했는데 이게 렘버브 정가서 같은 레그나 레그나면서 지속권을
When?
now 같은 다
When?
레그나면
We're asking you.
I think at least within this century, if we make constant effort with clear vision through education, I think possibility there. So that's why you see, we are working how to introduce in modern education system the secular ethics as a part of curriculum from kindergarten up to university level. So that's I feel, you see, that's the key thing. Altruism, just a few sort of explanation, not sufficient. Systematically, we have to educate people. I usually describe that we are selfish. It's right. But selfish should be wise selfish rather than foolish selfish. Usually our thinking selfish, just think oneself. Actually you are losing your friend, losing in many good things. Think more about others' well-being. You get maximum benefit. So that's wise selfish. So that also is not through teaching or blessing, but through education. We have ability to think long-term interest, short-term interest. I think through education we can change like that. So I think very possible. And in any way, whether it's possible or not, certain things at a certain level, certain level or certain period, see something unthinkable. But time changes, and then new reality. Now I think they're thinking more sort of was the inner world,
values, no?
inner values. It's the circumstances now create, you see, some sort of more and more number of problems because of the mental problems. So actually, some people say the whole world facing some kind of moral crisis. It is true. So therefore, you see, the circumstance itself now showing us, and environment also, the nature, mother nature, mother planet or mother nature itself now showing us you should be take more serious care about mother planet. Yeah. So the new reality now forcing us, we have to think more wider way, more holistic way, more compassionate way. So these entirely depend on awareness, education. So now I feel the problem is how to introduce in existing education field, you see these, ethics.
ethics law.
Not something you see. I think all religions you see carry same ethics, but that is based on faith. Although the former Pope you see, mentioned, the German Pope you see, mentioned, faith and reason must go together. So really, I think so that
True, no?
really true, but usually, you see, we some extent we use our reasons, then depend on faith. So then only those people who really have sincere faith, it worked. Ordinary people, I think, difficult. So now through education, you see, showing concern about other well-being is the best way to get your own well-being, including your own physical well-being and family well-being. I think we can. I think there's sufficient sort of material to educate people. That's the only way. That's the only hope, really. So through that way, I think there is possibility. Better world, better world means more compassionate world comes. Then certainly, better world, peaceful world. So this is everybody's sort of responsibility. Now, particularly now scientists. I usually telling the scientist is in the modern time real teacher, real guru. So of course here now full cooperation, a scientist and educationist work together, or in order to carry work. Firstly, sort of, because of from time to time, serious discussion. And particularly like right here now, I think university should take, you see,
initiative.
More sort of discussion. Then, at least the present generation, the student in the university, you see, get some new ideas. Then, when their generation become sort of responsible person, then pay more serious
attention.
Thank you so much, Your Holiness. I'm so sorry that we have come to the end of this session, but I think I speak on behalf of everybody that we really want to be part of this critical mass that you and Matthieu have talked about. And for my part, on behalf of the media, I want to do what we can to accelerate the education of everyone. And so I would like to invite everyone who is here to write on the Huffington Post and tell their stories of this journey. And I will make it easy by giving everybody my email address, which is arianna@huffingtonpost.com, and welcome your contributions, because you never know who is going to read it and who is going to be touched and inspired the way we have been touched and inspired by being in your presence here today. Thank you so much.
Check.
Your Holiness, before we leave, I would just like to thank a number of people who have made this event possible today, without whom we would never have such an event. I'd like to thank the Executive Director of the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds, who has been just magnificent through all of this, Barb Matheson, Liz Vanderwerth, Leo Dreyfus, Molly Schmidt, Allison Rowe, Susan Jensen, Olivia Thompson-Davies, Jake Moskal.
Yes, and I especially want to thank Jake Moskal, the Assistant Director of the Global Health Institute, and Betsy Teiglin as well.
And Carlene Kleeman and Donna Kelly. And I'd especially like to thank the City of Madison, the University of Wisconsin, the speakers, and also the young scientists and staff at the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds who've made this work possible, and most especially Your Holiness, who has inspired us all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think now last, I think a few decades, you see, this kind of work, you see, we almost I think regularly, you see, carry this work. So all these results come from kind of work, from teamwork. So I really appreciate. So then, it's quite natural. I think in the past human history, all those great sort of masters, teachers, firstly, one single person. Then their sort of teaching or their explanation is something very realistic and beneficial. So then more and more people showing interest, and that way to sort of spread. So small team, multiply, say 100 people, 1,000 people, 100,000 people, million, 100 million, 1,000 million. That's the only way to change humanity's way of thinking. And the lifestyle will change. Then this century would be really remarkable, sort of I think compare my century, that's 20th century, compare 20th century, this century really become remarkable. The previous century, century of bloodshed, century of violence. As I mentioned, this brilliant brain, you see, used for destruction. Those nuclear physicists, marvelous brain, but their knowledge becomes sort of disposal of hatred, anger. So I think this century should not be that way. So therefore, then, so our team, you see, we really have sort of so audience, you should not think just, you see, spend few moments here and listen what that person say, what that person say. Not that way. Think more seriously, each one. And then share more people. I think here maybe 1,000 people. And share at least 10 people. That means 10,000. And further, each 10,000, 10 person. Then, because it's 100,000, like that. That's the way. That's the way. So we all have this same responsibility and the same potential. You should not think, oh, I'm a single person. The problem is huge. I cannot do much. Should not think that way. The initiative must start from individual. For example, the peace must start from individuals' inner peace. Through that way, a peaceful family, peaceful society. And once we really develop peaceful society, then new leaderships coming from that kind of society, then will be more sensible. The society were full of sort of competition, full of greed, full of sort of distrust, and then leadership also is difficult, isn't it? We can't blame these leaders. We fail to build healthy society. So it is our responsibility. Thank you. Thank you. Please think more seriously. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Please tell people to join our movement.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.